everybody, and welcome back to our podcast, Healing Conversations with Dr. Carlos Warter and Gertrude Mache. Dr. Carlos, welcome back. How has been your week?
As most weeks, it's been intense.
Sometimes it gets like that, I know. So today we're going to pick up from where we left off last week, where we were talking about digital society and the impact of technology, the internet, that it's having on people worldwide. And what will be really nice is to explore what I call humanity's operating system, which is the Ubuntu philosophy. So when I moved to New Zealand 21 years ago, I realized that a lot of people who Google the word Ubuntu find a piece of software by Linux. It's an operating system which is based on this African philosophy, but a lot of people don't actually know what Ubuntu means. So Ubuntu, ngamuntu, ngabantu, if you literally translate it, says a person is a person through other people. It is our way of expressing the condition of being human, that without you, I don't exist, and without me, you don't exist. We are reflections of each other. My grandmother used to say, if a tree falls in a forest and nobody sees it, did it really fall? So we are in witnessing each other's presence and each other's being. And that's really, in a nutshell, what Ubuntu is. So how does this tie into the digital society that we are experiencing now?
Thank you and greetings. How was your week?
My week was fantastic. I celebrated my first grandson's first birthday. So my sons flew from New Zealand to Australia. We had an amazing reunion. We haven't been in the same space for 3 years because of COVID. So I had an amazing week.
There's a new baby.
Yes. Yeah.
Baby in a world that we're aiming for, not the one we received, hopefully the one we leave behind. So your question, let me first frame it into the fact that studies have shown that this is the best time humanity has lived. Yes, it is surprising to think that, but statistics show, for instance, that this is the time that percentage-wise, with income of nations, it is the least amount of money and goods spent in militarization than ever in history. Feudal lords in the Middle Ages dedicated their lives, and so did their kings, to have troops and armament and conquest. Also, we live the highest sanitary conditions in spite of the pox of monkeys and the pox of COVID. We live a healthier, especially in those countries that can afford it, I must say, but we live a healthier world organization of health, world societies that have a greater mastery in health. There is also percentage-wise less poverty, and I could go on and on and on. There are studies published in Harvard that show that. But to tie it into what we were talking about, the digital, the digicracia, not the democracia, but the digicracia, we are decaying in human values dramatically. We are decaying in certain principles. that have helped us get to that place of better humanity. I was speaking for a youngster in his early 20s who told me very clearly that the 10 Commandments meant nothing to him. So I said, "Thou shalt not steal." Makes any sense? "Thou shalt not murder." Makes any sense? No. Honor your father and mother and your mother and father so that your days are healthy and long. No. So I am very sad because to give a practical viewpoint on this honoring parents, it's not because we want to be nice to our elders. It's because our parents exist in each cell of our body. Each cell of our body is populated by the chromosomal lineage of your father and your mother. So I said, if you honor them, you will honor yourself. And if you honor yourself, you will honor your fellow being, your fellow man, your fellow woman. It felt like it fell in deaf ears. I reflected upon that, and I saw that it is not just the digitalization, which, if used ethically and appropriately, help us communicate. I'm sitting in California, and you're sitting in Melbourne, Australia. And behind, I see the map of the world and the great ocean that surrounds it. So I should say the map of planet ocean. And thanks to this digital reality, we can communicate and share with others that who knows where they are listening to. My intention is to give this a narrative that might awaken certain intrinsic values, certain intrinsic honors in people's minds, so that we can go to the place that has been totally forgotten, which is the place of narrative. We have run out of narrative and of her story or his story. Nobody cares about what happened to us yesterday. And the biggest teaching of this science or activity of human culture, her story, his story, its story, the story of the planet, is that we have learned that we don't learn anything from what happened before, and we repeat patterns over and over and over again, both in the collective as well as in the individual. As a spiritual psychiatrist, as a positive psychiatrist, in which I have focused on the infinite possibility that a human being can have, and not on the problems with which psychology and psychiatry has tarnished the human promise. The human promise is much larger than having a job and having money and having a house and having a car. The human promise is the recognition of the same consciousness in you as in me. And that is love. Love is that recognition in which I can relate to you, and we can relate to each other, knowing that what and who we are is clearly represented by what you were saying a few minutes ago, and that I would like to ask you to expand some more.
It's interesting because it's that disconnection between human beings that is causing a lot of the trouble and strife in the world. You know, I've lived in New Zealand for 21 years. And just before COVID, I only knew my neighbors to the left and to the right of my house. In Zimbabwe, I grew up in a street that had 50 families. We knew every single household by name, the fathers, the mothers, the grandparents, the uncles, the aunts of 50 homes in the street that I grew up. And then COVID happened. And during the lockdown, we had one of our neighbors come and leave letters in every letterbox in our neighborhood, in our street. His name was John. His wife's name was Mary. And they basically said, hey, this is John and Mary. We live at number 27. Just in case you need help during this lockdown, you might need groceries, you might need medical supplies. Here's our cell phone number. Please get in touch. This man went further and he created a Facebook group and united the entire street. For the first time in 21 years, I now know who lives in my street. And what was fascinating is 2 houses away from my house was a young woman who's disabled. She's in a wheelchair and she had 2 little children. One was a year old, the other one was a 5-year-old. And she couldn't have anyone come in to help. No assisted help was allowed to come in. But I was able to offer my service as a storyteller. And she would put her little 5-year-old son on Zoom every afternoon. And I would entertain him and tell him African stories. And this poor woman could just sit back for an hour every day and have a cup of tea because her little 5-year-old was otherwise being occupied by me and my storytelling. So the moral of the story is that this pandemic has come to remind us of how connected we really are. There is actually no separation between us as human beings. When they finished sequencing the human genome, they found that every single human on this planet is 99.9% the same. So our perceived differences are only skin deep. And what this experience did for me in New Zealand was just to remind me of my upbringing, how we live in Africa in these communal societies. In fact, when we greet in my language, we say sawona, and sawona means I see you. And it's not the seeing of sight, it's an acknowledgement of your humanity and mine. And when we greet in the morning, in Shona, we say mangwanani, mamuka sei, which is good morning, how did you rise? The response is damuka kana mamukao. I woke up well if you woke up well. So we believe that if one person in the household is not okay, we're all not okay. And COVID has come to remind us of this, that we are literally a breath away from affecting and infecting each other. If one human being on the planet is ill, the whole of humanity is experiencing that illness. So it's been really fascinating for me to watch COVID play out. I do believe that nature has a way of pulling us back and reminding us of who we truly are. Carbon emission has gone down. People are being forced to deal with relationships in the home. Marriages are breaking down. Marriages are being created. We are being forced to face who we are as human beings. And I do believe there's an opportunity for us to reconnect in a very authentic way, to be fully present to each other. I always say that the best way to install the Ubuntu philosophy is to put your family first. It starts at home, in your household. Then you go out to your community. the people you see who are homeless on the streets, the disadvantaged. And then you go to the world and see what you can do to help. And the help doesn't have to be monetary. It's as simple as a smile at a stranger in a supermarket. Just that smile can make somebody's day. I remember when I lost my mom in April 2020, I didn't manage to go back to Zimbabwe to bury my mother. I still haven't seen her grave. I was very depressed, and I was in a supermarket, and this woman just looked at me and she said, "Are you okay?" I don't know what she saw in me, but she saw that something was wrong. And I had a breakdown in the middle of a vegetable section in a supermarket, just because somebody saw me. They saw beyond the physical. She tuned in that something was not okay in me. And that's what I mean about being present. It starts at home, it goes out to community, that if we can make a difference, we need to reconnect globally as well.
Yes, I couldn't but agree. But I have one point of discrepancy. Yes, it starts in our hearts. It goes I down. It goes to I, us. It goes to I, humanity. Now, did I mention family? Not necessarily. Because as the Indian tradition says, people have karmas or consequences of previously related actions in this life or in every other life, in this dimension or any other, and they have to pay out their karma. It is only when we connect through what's called dharma or the higher service that we become a family of spirit, a family of soul, a family of transcendence. I have discovered that definitely I have much more in common with you than with my cousin. Even though blood relations seem to be closer, given this not so sane analysis of families that are related to a surname and not to soul awareness.
Yeah.
Because I would love that my biological family would resonate dharmically or in the higher service of the most subtle. And why do I say subtle? I will get back in a second. In the most subtle vibration of who we are. Because to me, this whole physical experiment called life here, not life everywhere, but life here, is a training ground for us to know and remember who we truly are in a transcendental level. I find every experience in my life is preparing me more and more to leave this body behind at some point that is not decided by circumstances or by me, but decided by the mystery. The mystery. Because I know less than I know. There is much more I do not know than I have already accumulated in my information pattern. And in this way, the transcendent aspect, and I always give this example to my students. I have never seen a baby come out of the womb and grab on their shoulder the placenta and walk around with the placenta for the first few years of life. Never. It doesn't exist. Never does it exist that we evolve into the next dimension of consciousness and carry our body. Our body is the vehicle of operation in this solid dimension, this airy dimension that stands on solidity of earth. The same as the amniotic fluid is the liquid dimension for that child which was born and doesn't carry the water and doesn't carry the artifact that helped him wonderfully to get nourished. I studied psychology and I studied psychiatry, but my point of view has been what's called transpersonal. Transpersonal is looking at life in a larger extension. And this larger extension, the narrative of the soul, the narrative of essence, is which has been forgotten, is what has been forgotten by this digitalization in which you and I are not worth who we are, but the data, the little characteristics that has been accumulated with one purpose: money, monetization, sales, and the offering of so many different ideas that are not values. I live in a part of the world, let me put it mildly, in which as long as you don't damage somebody, and as long as it is accepted, you're valuable. Where is honor? Where is love? Where is togetherness? Where is liberty? Where is nobility? Omitted, disappeared, because it's monetized and it cannot be used to sell something. Now, if we turn off the light, if we turn off electricity, there isn't one monument, there isn't one statue, and there is not one living tradition transmitted from generation to generation that we. And the same as COVID is the response or the message of the earth to our ignorance of the earth as a living being, of the universe as a living unfoldment, of the solar system as a living voyaging. So has COVID woken us up to what you were saying, we're in this together. But not only COVID, climate change. I recently discovered that not only can't we live in higher temperatures, but our lungs, the forest, stops doing photosynthesis if the temperature goes up beyond certain limits, and therefore we can breathe. We're in a crisis. We're in a crisis that's economic. We're in a crisis that's political. We're in a crisis that's war and others. But we're in a spiritual crisis because we are not linking up to what you were saying. Because who I am is not only reflected in you, and who you are is not only reflected in us, but also in our ancestry, And also in the descent, if they embody the teaching of life, they will be happy. And if they don't, then no matter how much money, name and fame, prestige, and admiration they can get, how many likes they get on Facebook, they will not be happy. Because happiness, and I finish with this, is a function of peace. And if we don't have peace in our heart, like my blessed father used to say, when he would say, don't worry so much about everything. The most important thing is to have peace in your heart.
Fascinating. Now, they say that peace begins with me. For there to be peace in the world, every single individual person has to focus on self. It's a difficult concept to grasp because circumstances like wars are created by those outside of yourself. So how do we find peace in a world of chaos and upheaval?
The law that peace begins with me. But who is me? Who am I? Is the most important existential inquiry that we can do. Peace is not my mind and my body. Peace can't even exist in my, quote unquote, my, mind and body. Peace is a territory. Let me use this example. The journey to the country of peace or the vibration of peace is the function of our effort to let go of what is called the false identification and the search with all our heart, with all our love, with our mind, and with all our resources to the world of peace, which is eternal. So when you say that, how can I have peace if there is a war there? How can I have peace and freedom if I'm in prison? How can I have peace and freedom and love if I'm alone? I bear witness that it is possible because the one that is in prison, the one that is enslaved, and the one that does not know needs to know, needs to discover. And I can tell you in my life, I have dedicated, I don't know how many lives, but I know that at least 52 years of this life to the pursuit of that, the discovery of the inquiry, who am I? I am is not followed by any surname. I am black, I am white. I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer. I'm a male, I'm a female. I am gay, I am trans. All those sub-personalities are interim, limited by time, and not eternal. So we need to discover an I amness which transcends all these forms so that we can use the narrative and even use the data, not for monetization, but for connection.
I love that. Absolutely awesome. A beautiful reminder to us all, and probably an excellent place for us to stop today's interview and podcast. This is an interesting subject. I really would like to continue along this thread. One thing that you did say about you and I and the connection we have, I do believe that we do have soul families, people we meet and you connect and click on a very energetic level. There's no need to explain who you are, what you stand for. And sometimes your biological family are not those people. I think they are put in our lives to stretch us, to make us grow and make us aware of who we are, and vice versa.
And also, the Upanishads, the most ancient scripture in Sanskrit, says, let me be born, if I have to be born again here, in the most conscious and enlightened family possible. And not in the wealthiest one, or the most intellectual, or the most emotional, or the most physically endowed. Let me be born in the most intellectual, no, physical, no, spiritually active. And when people are born in those environments, there is a second prayer. Let me recognize
it. I like that. Let me be born and let me recognize it. Thank you, Dr. Carlos. This has been a very interesting discussion today. Thank you so much to everybody who's tuned in. We will be back again next week with yet another interesting podcast. Tune in, learn, explore, and discover who you truly are. Bye for now, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Carlos. Absolute pleasure reconnecting.